Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World, the Eurozone. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines coming out of Europe this hour. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will travel to Turkey on Wednesday to push for renewed negotiations with Russia to end the war. A Turkish source says US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will also join the meetings as Kyiv prepares new proposals for peace. The Kremlin says President Putin is open to hearing from US Envoy Witkoff and Turkish officials about the results of talks in Istanbul. But Russian representatives will not join the meeting. Moscow calls on France's fighter jet deal with Ukraine regrettable and insists it remains open to negotiations, saying its position is well known in Washington, Istanbul and Kyiv. Meanwhile, on the ground, Russian drones strike Dnipro overnight, damaging the newsroom of public broadcaster Susplein and Ukrainian radio Dnipro. Local officials say 2 people are injured and multiple fires and infrastructure damage are reported across the region. Today, Ukrainian President Zelensky arrives in Spain for meetings with King Felipe and Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez to bolster support for Kyiv. Zelensky says the visit will focus on air defense systems and missiles, with Spain set to deepen its commitment to Ukraine. In the UK, 6 activists accused of breaking into Israeli defence firm Elbit Systems' Bristol site and causing over £1 million of damage appear in UK court. The defendants, linked to the now proscribed Palestine Action Group, are met by protesters outside Woolwich Crown Court as their 10-week trial begins. Pope Leo calls for concrete action on climate change at a COP30 event, warning that some leaders lack the political will to act. He says the Paris Agreement remains the strongest tool to protect people and the planet. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron team up to press for greater European digital sovereignty and less reliance on US tech giants. The 2 leaders say Europe must build stronger homegrown technology to secure its economic and strategic future. Britain plans to ban the resale of concert and sports tickets at inflated prices in a move to crack down on ticket touts. Minister Steve Reed says the practice forces fans to pay through the nose as scalpers use tech to snap up popular events. Those are the headlines coming out of Europe this hour, but we of course start coming out of the East, and Russian President Vladimir Putin's special envoy Kirill Dmitriev has said that the Russia and US have discussed the possibility of conducting another prisoner exchange. While details remain limited, the talks signal ongoing diplomatic channels between Washington and Moscow, despite the ongoing tensions between the leaders of both the countries over the Russia-Ukraine war. Okay, we have further news coming out of the conflict coming up next. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry has stated that its forces have captured settlements of Novchaikia in the Dnipropetrovsk region and Telehi in the Kharkiv region of eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russian drones have damaged a building housing in the Dnipro newsroom of public broadcaster Susplein and Ukrainian radio Dnipro in a major overnight attack on the city. Susplein is Ukraine's nationwide public broadcaster, operating television, radio and online news services through a network of regional outlets across the country. Dnipro, an industrial city in east-central Ukraine and wider Dnipropetrovsk region, have faced repeated Russian missile and drone attacks, killing civilians and damaging housing, industry and infrastructure. Joining us now is Ben Aris. He is a journalist and he joins us live from Berlin. Thank you very much, Ben, for joining us here on NewsX World. Pleasure to have you on the programme. Of course, Russia has claimed further villages in Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv. Do these announcements reflect real battlefield momentum coming from Moscow, Ben?
What's going on here is that, as we've been talking this week, there's a huge fight going on in Petrovsk, which is in the Donbass, further to the east, But the Russian forces are now pushing into the Dnipropetrovsk region, which is just to the west. It borders with Donbass. But this is in effect a giant pincer movement. I mean, the entry into Dnipropetrovsk region is relatively new. And what the Russians are trying to do is come around behind the back and further put the supplies from central Ukraine to the east, to the Donbass, the main front line. They put those under pressure in order to starve the troops out and push through the campaign. I mean, Putin is throwing everything he's got at trying to take the Donbass. And that's his stated war goal. And if he captures the whole region, he holds about 90% now, then that for him would be a valid reason to declare victory, one that he could sell to the Russian people, and then bring the war to an end, or at least, finally concede to doing some sort of ceasefire talks. And so this Dnipro dynamic that's going on is trying to speed that up, because the actual front line in Donbass at Petrovsk, that's turned into a Stalingrad. I mean, Russians looked like they were going to take the city last week, but now they've got bogged down into individual battles over individual buildings. And Putin is desperately trying to cut off the supplies to Ukraine to bring this fight to an end.
And Ben, what more can you tell us about the death toll, the consequences and the fatalities of this war? Obviously, we don't get many visuals coming out of the front line. You called the current, some current fighting going on, the same status as Stalingrad, a huge battle back in the Second World War. What more can you tell us about casualties coming out of this conflict?
Well, the casualties are state secret on both sides, and so we really have no idea. But, the estimates run to 1 million dead and wounded. And the actual fatalities, I mean, they're over 100,000, if not up to 250,000. Neither side is releasing those extremely politically sensitive numbers. That on the Ukrainian side, they tend to downplay it quite dramatically. And certainly the ratio, because Russia's attacking, typically you'd see like 3 deaths to 1 in attacker-defender scenario. And Russia's taking losses, again, it's reported 1,000 people a day, but we don't know an actual number, an accurate number, but clearly the death toll is horrific.
Yes, Ben Aris, do stay with us as we have further updates, but this time from the diplomatic side of the war. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited Spain's parliament today as part of his European tour, following a stop in France. He was welcomed by Parliament Speaker Francina Armengol and State Senate President Pedro Roland before greeting Parliament, board members and signing the Book of Honour. Zelensky is expected to meet Spain's defence minister and senior defence executives, then attend a lunch hosted by King Philippe. Later, he will join Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez to view Picasso's famed Guernica and end the day with a joint press conference at the Moncloa Palace. Ben joins us once again. Ben, of course, Zelensky is facing a lot of trouble at home. In regards to a corruption scandal which is ongoing inside Ukraine. Russian news has reported, of course, these are Russian figures coming out of the TASS news agency, but they've said that Zelensky's popularity has fallen by 40% in the past month due to this corruption scandal. How do you think these optics are looking to the Ukrainians, given the fact that Zelensky is in Spain, of course, viewing Picasso paintings, going for grand dinners with kings? Your thoughts?
Zelensky's been backed against the wall. This corruption scandal is incredibly damaging. It comes on top of an attempt by Zelensky in July in order to gut the anti-corruption reforms that have been put in place.
I do apologise, we seem to have some audio issues there. Hopefully Ben gets back to us. Ben joins us once again. Apologies, Ben, we seem to have had some audio issues there. You were saying? Okay, of course, apologies there, we have further advance peace. Meanwhile, US envoy Steve Witkoff is expected in Turkey on November the 19th Reports say that he will take part in planned discussions with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who hopes to revive stalled negotiations and restart prisoner of war exchanges. Zelensky is set to travel to Turkey on November the 19th, saying that Ukraine has developed new proposals which will be presented to partners. However, Russia says its own representatives will not attend the Istanbul talks, even as it insists it remains open to negotiations. Gilbert Doctorow joins us now. He's a Russian affairs expert. He joins us live from Brussels. Gilbert, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. What are your thoughts? Of course, Moscow says it's open to these discussions, open to negotiations. However, a no-show in Istanbul, does that prove that Moscow, does that prove the opposite of this statement?
I think that the mission of Mr. Zelensky to Istanbul is an effort to stamp out the problems he has with the United States over the corruption scandal that your expert panelist was speaking about a few moments ago. Both in Europe and the United States, there's $150 million skimming from contracts relating to energy by Mr. Zelensky's closest associates has put him under a cloud. And he has been, in the last several days, very, very busy in diplomacy, traveling to Greece, to France, now to Spain, all with and ahead of him, this trip to Istanbul, precisely to overcome all the negatives from this latest corruption scandal and to remind Ukrainians as well that he's doing his job. After all, he concluded a major contract with the French for 100.
Gilbert, of course, Turkey has played mediator before. Does Ankara have leverage left with Moscow and Kiev at this stage? And of course, bear in mind the United States' relationship in these discussions as well, of course.
Well, of course, Russia will try not to offend the United States and try not to appear to be against negotiations with Zelensky. However, of course, the Kremlin is decidedly against concluding any agreement with Zelensky, with the Nazi gang that he represents in control of Ukraine since 2014. The objectives of the Russian special military operation, as originally announced by President Putin and repeated ever since numerous times, includes not only demilitarization, meaning the destruction of the Ukrainian army, which is proceeding rather nicely, but denazification, meaning, put it in simple English, regime change. If there is no hint of regime change that comes out of this announcement of the visit by Zelensky to Istanbul.
Yes, Gilbert Doctorow, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of the conflict. And Russia's Sergey Lavrov has met Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar in Moscow to discuss strengthening bilateral ties ahead of Russian President Vladimir Putin's scheduled visit to New Delhi next month. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, Jaishankar led the Indian delegation at the upcoming meeting of the cabinet. No date has been confirmed as of yet. However, Sergey Lavrov and Jaishankar meet in Moscow in preparation for these talks and this hugely significant visit by the Russian president to New Delhi. Okay, let's move on. Okay, Gilbert Doctorow joins us once again. Apologies. What is the real strategic substance behind this meeting? S. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister, visiting Moscow prior, of course, to this state visit by Russian President Vladimir Putin to New Delhi before the end of this year.
The timing for this visit has become extremely unfortunate for the participants, both for India and for Russia. I think that the close relationship in energy that existed before his announced secondary sanctions between India and Russia. Just yesterday, the Indians announced that they have agreed with the United States to purchase 10% of their petroleum gas requirements. This is used primarily for house.
Okay, apologies there. Once again, we've got network issues. Thank you very much, Gilbert Doctorow, for joining us here on NewsX World. We now move on, and we stay in the east of the continent, and tens of thousands of people in Slovakia have protested against populist Prime Minister Robert Fico and his pro-Russian stance, marking the anniversary of the 1989 Velvet Revolution that ended decades of communist rule in the former Czechoslovakia. Fico has long been a divisive figure in Slovakia, and thousands have repeatedly rallied to protest his policies. Most recently, his government cancelled the national holiday that marked the Velvet Revolution, calling it part of austerity measures. Fico has argued that he is defending democratic values and national sovereignty of Slovakia and righting injustices done to him and allies by the previous government. And that's all that we have time for this hour here on NewsX World Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.